my mountain stream talking and my squirrel dog barking, coming through loud and clear. And I could hear Arkansas calling me all the way from there. Get it.
Welcome to Shirley, Arkansas. Population 374. Shirley is a small, proud community in the Ozark Mountains of north central Arkansas. Let's take a look. Like many rural communities in America today, Shirley is facing economic decline and has been for many years. Shirley began to decline after World War II. Whole families left the area during those years to pursue greater opportunity in the prospering cities of post-war America. Even worse, Shirley was dealt a devastating blow in 1946 when the area's top two employers were lost in a flood that destroyed both the railroad and the timber industry.
Right after World War II, all of the boys come back, and of course, you know, they had a lot of jobs here. Then it come a flood and washed the bridges and the railroad away, so the town began to die because they couldn't build the railroad back. So it began to die with, you know, because that was a life of the town and a lot of other towns. You know, Heber Springs and all of them on that, because it was timber towns, you know. And the boys all come back from service, and they needed jobs and whatever, some of them, you know, but it really put the town in hardship. See, all the kids then that graduated from high school and whatever, there wasn't nothing for them to do because they had to leave because there wasn't nothing here for them to work at. We just dwindled down, the town kept adrenaline, and first thing you know, it's down, you know, and it's been that way for a long time.
By all assessment, Shirley has been down. But this video is not a story of rural America wallowing in economic depression. This is a study of rural community development and how, by working with focus, determination, and innovation, a small rural town is regaining its vitality and economic self-sufficiency.
My name is Mark Peterson. I'm a community development specialist with the Cooperative Extension Service. Every community faces its own challenges, but many of these are not economic in nature. We often take for granted water, roads, streets, sewers, infrastructure, without realizing what would happen if those were destroyed and how difficult it is to take them back. But regardless of the nature of the challenge, it always comes back to citizens, to community leaders who are willing to take responsibility.
A major part of the revitalization of Shirley, Arkansas began humbly, almost accidentally, 10 years ago on the Kimmons family front porch. It was a place friends gathered for warm fellowship and fiery discussion. Like most front porches in America, talk ranged on various topics. But as concerned citizens of the Shirley area, the conversations invariably settled on the condition of the town and surrounding community.
Jobs, beautification, cleanup, recreation, youth programs, libraries, senior transportation, all these things were things we needed bad enough. It was just a matter not of if we're going to get them, but when.
When people tell me something's impossible, I don't believe that. And I had been a teacher for 16 years, and I saw our children leaving here because there are no jobs.
It involves people. Somewhere within every community there's a leader. And what we're really talking about is leadership. And whether it's born by an individual or whether it's born through a group, every community needs leadership.
We were very, very fortunate in that we had the individuals at the time that could separate out the dreams and make them be a reality and you know, let it come to pass, you know, make it be a reality as opposed to a dream.
Fortunately for Shirley, the neighbors on this front porch were not content to just talk. They were people of action. Among them, some had or were currently serving in local government. Some were successful business persons, and others educators and community activists. One thing they all had in common was a determination to make their home better.
I think people have to be in love with their community. They have to believe that their community is a special place and they want to make it a little better place to live. If you don't have that, you can't do this. I mean, because you don't get any rewards for so long, even in getting grants.
The Ozark Operetta, alive with the mountains and streams. It begins at dawn and plays all night long in the land of music and dreams.
The group's first attempt at community service in Shirley came in a time of crisis when the town's wells failed. Tom Kimmons, the city grant writer, secured a grant through the Arkansas Industrial Development Commission for a new water system. The crisis was averted.
Well, it really was a valuable learning experience because not only did we get a new water system and good quality water, we also learned that when you go to write these grants, it's not just you write them one day and you get them back in the mail the next with a yes or a no. Really, I think what we got at it was the skills to know how you go about preparing the grant, packaging the grant, who you send it to. You also learned the follow-up and the commitment is really what makes it happen.
It was at this time that a representative from the Arkansas Industrial Development Commission, or AIDC, came to Shirley to discuss economic development in their area. The group's major hurdle to community improvement was getting the money to support itself. The city didn't have the funds to help, and the community was not convinced of the group's ability or intent. The group got a lot of helpful information from their meetings with the AIDC representative, but there was one aspect that especially interested them: the process.
A community development corporation is a relatively new concept in planning and development. When I first visited Shirley and community and the Fairfield Bay area, I could tell there was a basis for a core of leadership, but what they lacked was an organizational structure that would make it possible to continue doing what they had been doing, to provide a framework for securing more funds, to build on the leadership that they already had. It's very important that we have models to learn from, which is what the Shirley Community Service and Development Corporation is providing for all of us in this profession and others with community development corporations. What they're doing now with a new little industry that they're growing is happening because they have been following a process that is laid down by the principles of community development. Any community can do that. They found the things that they're using now for that community by going through the steps that any community can do.
His name is Jerry Smith, and he brought to our attention what a community development corporation was, that it was a nonprofit institution, it was a grassroots organization. It felt like that sort of a nonprofit approach could do things and access resources that either as individuals or the municipalities or for-profit entities perhaps didn't have the access to.
I think it establishes credibility right off the bat. It's hard to involve people who are skeptical about other people, and a CDC nonprofit, right from the very beginning, you can set yourself forward in the public eye as being nonprofit motivated. There's no one in the background going to be financially benefiting from this. What is being done is more on a humanistic approach. Someone is doing this from the heart, not from the pocketbook.
A community development corporation is an organization incorporated to form particular purposes. When Alexis de Tocqueville, who's a French sociologist, came here in the 1830s, he was impressed with how community leaders in this country came together to deal with their problems. The Shirley Community Service and Development Corporation utilizes that CDC as a legal mechanism for leaders to come together to deal with their issues.
It's not an easy chore, and you have to have a lot of patience and certainly a lot of tenacity, because it means dealing with a certain amount of government bureaucracy and the IRS. And you begin really by filing with the state that you live in our case with the Secretary of State of Arkansas. You fill out some forms and apply for a nonprofit status. And going from that point, then you have to do the hard part and go to Uncle Sam and the IRS for your 501c3 tax-exempt recognition.
So from a group of community-conscious members, the Shirley Community Service and Development Corporation was born in 1988. A board of directors was established with several prominent citizens involved, including the mayor of Shirley. The organization's mission and goals for 5, 10, and 20 years were officially adopted. The group was well-meaning and had lots of lofty goals, but there was, as yet, no money to finance their vision or operations. The Shirley CDC's focus for the next several years was to attain more grant money to fund community service projects. The nonprofit status of the CDC allowed them to pursue grant monies that would have been unavailable otherwise. Even so, times would be lean for the next several years for the fledgling organization.
Every community, we believe, needs to have some kind of organization that's promoting development work within, the confines of the community. Shirley CDC is a good example of an organization that has grown up, looked at what was needed in the community, set up the type of collaborations with local entities to get that done, and have gone to work on that.
A startup grant from the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation paid a minimum wage salary for a secretary bookkeeper. Everyone else worked as a volunteer. The Shirley CDC kept in close contact with the WRF for assistance. The Rockefeller Foundation proved to be the closest and most dependable supporter for many years.
We're proud to have been one of the investors. We count that as the type of investment we'd like to make. That is a local organization that's on the ground, have a good sense of what needs to happen, have a good sense of what skills and what assets are present, and to bring that to bear on making life better for citizens in that particular town. That's an investment we were happy to make, and we're glad we were able to do that.
They also called on the University of Arkansas, Arkansas State University, and the Cooperative Extension Service for advice and resources. There were many needs in Shirley, and tough decisions had to be made on what projects to pursue. In 1989, the CDC decided their next projects would be to secure grant money for a picnic pavilion, lighted ball field, and rodeo arena lights. The Shirley CDC saw this community park as important for several reasons.
The needs that we saw right off the bat was the ability to get the community together in more of a social environment. Where do you do that the best? Through your children, through the Little League, through softball leagues. So we focused our efforts in trying to develop grant writing. That was kind of getting our feet wet, trying to get an understanding. Can we even do this?
I think one thing that the CDC offered was giving people some new visions of things we could acquire, could aspire to. For example, one thing we wanted to do was develop our youth. And one way you can really get all the people involved in projects is through recreational activities. Everybody likes to have a good time. So one of our first grants was develop a community park. And in this park, we built a picnic pavilion. This was a grant from Parks and Tourism. We had we lit the ball fields in the rodeo arena. Now, For years, people used to go down there to the ball games in the daytime, and it was summertime, and it was hot, and they'd sit there and cook. After we got the lights set up, though, it was cool at night. You could come down there, bring your family. It was a good way for the people to relate to a project in the community, but it was also a good way to bring all the different ages. Didn't matter how old or young or girls or boys, everybody can go to the park at night. It's a good social atmosphere for people to get together and have fun, and they're using it in a CDC project that got the grant, that got the lights and the pavilion and the playground, and it was just a good thing for everyone to feel like they were included.
There are many examples of community development that have failed because whoever was involved did not engage the community in a way to gain the support of the community. Developing the park and the activities in Shirley really served that purpose and gained the support because it was an activity that everyone could participate in and see the visible results of it.
Walking down the road, what you think I see? Chicken in the middle and a possum in a tree. Kids come running for to meet their pa. Mama starts crying when she hears me call. Hi-ho, feels so good. Pretty little farm like I knew it would. Dancing and the singing never felt so fine. Cause I've gone away for my very last time.
Shirley has yet to produce a championship team, but the lighted fields have gone a long way to promote community pride and support for the Shirley CDC. Grant money was also attained to purchase a senior van that transports the elderly and handicapped. In 1992, a grant funded computers for the new city library. Monies also supported a beautification project. A grant from the Department of Human Services enabled the CDC to begin a summer youth program in 1989 and later expand into a JTPA-funded job training program. From 1988 to 1991, the Shirley CDC acquired funding for 7 public service projects totaling $400,000. Each success brought them more viability and support from the community. Public service projects, however, were only one aspect of the Shirley CDC. The Community Development Corporation had always had longer-term aspirations for itself and the community.
We felt from the very beginning that we wanted to get into something that would develop people. We wanted to see people prosper economically, educationally. And we thought, well, can the CDC address this?
The Shirley CDC had improved services in Shirley, but it had hoped ultimately to improve the standard of living, too. Unemployment rates in the region were high and wages were low. So the CDC began looking seriously at developing or attracting a viable economic base for the region that would create job opportunities for the people.
We wanted something that used our natural resources, which we have a whole lot of in this community. I know one time from the Rockefeller Foundation, a wise man once said that Arkansas's economic past has been about looking for outside industries or outside businesses to come here and set up a plant or a factory and hire us to work. But Arkansas's future economic development is going to be about local people developing small grassroots industries that employ local people that have deep roots of the community. So we wanted the kind of an industry that could be generated at the grassroots level and sustained here. We wanted something that would utilize our people's natural skills. And for example, there's a lot of wood choppers, there's a lot of timber people in this culture here. People like to grow things in this culture. So we were looking at something that utilized resources, was environmentally friendly, and that could take these natural resources and develop them here, develop the whole thing here, and keep that value when we sold it coming back to Arkansas, coming back to this rural area.
First, there had to be a thorough assessment of the region's assets, liabilities, and needs. Factors like restricted transportation, limited utilities, and an unskilled workforce limited possibilities for job creation and economic development in this area of the Ozark Mountains. However, the natural resources of the area, such as abundant timber and water, were certainly positive assets, as well as a large family-oriented general labor force. A steering committee investigated a variety of potential industries for the region. Among the most promising were a uniform cleaning company, hybrid tomato production, a doll manufacturing enterprise, and shiitake mushroom cultivation. The CDC weighed the pros and cons of each and eventually would decide that shiitake mushroom cultivation would be best suited both environmentally, culturally, and economically for the region.
The hardwood forest in the climatic weather zone of the central Arkansas Ozarks is very similar to that of Japan, where the shiitake mushroom is native.
There were other considerations that led to the final decision to begin a shiitake mushroom industry in the area, but these were the major concerns. First, abundant hardwood forests and water. Second, natural skills in logging and wood chopping. Third, ideal temperature, rainfall, and seasons. Fourth, an existing global market. And fifth, that it be non-capital intensive. The Shirley CDC became convinced that shiitake was both a product and an agricultural industry the corporation wanted to pursue. Then they began to reach out for assistance and information. Contact was made with various state agencies and universities, as well as other shiitake producers and suppliers. During the summer of 1991, the CDC invested a small amount to experiment with shiitake cultivation in Shirley. It took all summer for the first shiitake to fruit. It was time to find financial support for their project in the community. This would be a true test of how well the community supported the CDC and its efforts. A local businesswoman invested enough money to purchase an initial 7,000 logs and shiitake growing supplies. The investor was also able to purchase an old abandoned factory building and adjacent two-bedroom house in Shirley with her funding. These had sat vacant for 10 years and were in very bad shape. The CDC refurbished these buildings and turned them into a production and training facility, enabling shiitake production year-round.
I grew up in the hills of Arkansas, and I know that poor people will always be poor if they continue to do the same old thing the same old way. The Shirley CDC is led by a group of people who have some new ideas for economic growth. What they needed was a jump start. That's all I did. The rest they did for themselves.
During this time, representatives of the CDC were attending seminars and conferences on both shiitake production and economic development. They were pulling together a support network. At one conference, the Shirley CDC received encouragement from the U.S. Economic Development Administration and consideration of financial support in the way of grant money for future needs. It was clear that to achieve a large degree of economic success with a shiitake industry, area producers and markets would need to be researched, developed, and organized. The CDC sponsored a shiitake symposium in February of 1991 to assemble new shiitake producers and organize those already in the business in the state. A mailing list of those who might be interested in such a symposium was created with help from the Cooperative Extension Service, several state universities, other shiitake producers and suppliers, and from friends and acquaintances. From that mailing, an overwhelming response returned. The February Shiitake Symposium was filled to capacity with 120 interested attendees. The gathering was a success, and from that initial meeting, a decision was made to form a statewide growers association.
This was another example of successful networking. The Shirley CDC did the organizing, a private college offered a central meeting place, a nearby local nonprofit did a mailing list, and Co-op Extension did the printing and mailing.
To see how large, well-established shiitake industries in the Midwest were operating, representatives from the Shirley CDC traveled to Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa and toured several shiitake growing operations and brokers. Information from this trip was invaluable to both the Community Development Corporation and the Growers Association.
The most important thing we learned from our reaching out for more information was how to lay out a shiitake mushroom operation. We made comparisons of these various facilities, listened to owners' complaints about their facilities, and then tried to do better.
The transformation of the abandoned factory and adjacent house into the new shiitake production and training facility was finally complete in the spring of 1992. The Shirley CDC took time out at this point to rest, regroup, and reassess.
So call on me when you think you're free. Come to my home and rest your weary hay. Call on me when you think you're free enough to live the way you say.
Most community development efforts do not operate at full steam all the time. They have spurts of activities, they need to take a break, they need to reflect on what they've done, to evaluate what they've done, and they need to celebrate their success.
The Shirley CDC used this downtime to take a fresh look at its strategic vision and action plan to develop an ongoing development process. They had gone from 30 logs in the backyard in '92 to 7,000 logs in the front yard in '93 to 20,000 logs inside and outside the production facility in '96. Each year, the CDC increased its know-how, its log population, and its sales. They also refined the selection of best log types, best spawn, and best consumer markets. The Shirley CDC is now expanding its role in the community and helping to develop shiitake mushroom production in other areas. The CDC secured federal funding from the U.S. Department of Commerce and has negotiated a long-term lease on the mushroom training facility. So far, they have had good success opening markets in Arkansas, and now they are expanding into surrounding states in the gift and health market with both fresh, dehydrated, and value-added products. In 1995, the CDC purchased 7 new computers with USDA grant funds. These computers are used to train local townspeople who have not had access to computers before. Shiitake growers also have access to the computers, which are an invaluable tool in modern-day marketing. The CDC, in cooperation with the Ozark Shiitake Growers Association, holds regular open houses and seminars like this one to recruit and train potential shiitake producers.
It's an ongoing learning process for everybody, not only for the citizens in the community, but for the organizations that are there, for the professionals that whose role it is to provide help. It's a learning process all around, and that's how we end up growing, and that is that everybody brings something to the table.
Shirley CDC demonstration sites operated by other CDCs have been set up in 5 other Arkansas communities where they demonstrate to their local residents the methods of growing shiitake mushrooms. The role of the Shirley CDC is now primarily concerned with expanding and supporting the shiitake mushroom industry in Arkansas and surrounding states. This means being a clearinghouse of information and resources for growers in the region. They have recently received a full set of the formal journal of the American Mycological Society as a reference library for all interested parties. The number of growers in Arkansas is steadily rising, and the outlook for further growth and prosperity with shiitake is good. So far, the CDC has helped develop 12 large growers, 6 medium-sized growers, and about 40 small growers.
You know, we've spent so much time developing the shiitake mushroom industry that a lot of folks call us the mushroom people. But we're not the mushroom people, we're the community development people. Shiitake production for us has always been a tool to use for economic development, to create jobs and income. We enjoy growing shiitake mushrooms, but it's primarily a means to an end. What the Shirley CDC is all about is growing people.
When I started growing shiitake, I was working at a minimum wage job. I had no plans for the future. Since then, I became a grower on a daily basis. I've doubled my income, and I've started to college 2 days a week.
As part of its longer-range vision, the Shirley CDC is looking into other forms of alternative agriculture. Experiments and research is being done on herbs, rhubarb, and flowers, as well as other crops, to determine their viability. The CDC is also reaching out to surrounding communities in hopes of expanding potential growth through cooperation. For the members and supporters of the Shirley CDC, economic development has been a long and sometimes frustrating process. But as they step back, they can see vast improvements in the quality of services and the quality of life in Shirley and the surrounding community.
If you're committed on the front end like we were, you don't get that frustrated. I mean, sometimes you have to look back and think, do we really want this bad? And every time the answer was yes.
Well, how do you do it? You can't talk about it. You have to get out and actually do something. The doing is the part that people see. Therein was the ball fields, the lit rodeo arenas, the senior van program, the grant from forestry for planting dogwood trees at Fairfield Bay. It's not so much the substance as what people perceived that was being done. And now then you see all of this, the shiitake mushroom, the involvement of more and more people, the people that's in the other room in there learning computers. We're having an impact on folks' lives, and that's what the Shirley CDC was all about. It's the very thing that Tom and I discussed back in 1986, sitting on that little porch swing over there at his real estate office. And it's really exciting just to be involved and be a part.
We look at them one person at a time, one step at a time, and if we can change the lives of 1 or 2 or 3 people, ultimately, that's what we're about. Because all of those people combined is your community.
Now it's a lot of different talk than what it was, see. Now they're believing, well, and I think that a lot of them is going to get in it, you know, because they seeing it form right before their eyes. It's something that they didn't believe to start with, see. You take a kid, if you had a kid finish high school up here, it'd tickle you to know that he'd had a job here, you know, not have to go off somewhere else to work. So that's where people, I've heard more all the time, more every day. They're talking, you know, and I really think that it's going to grow.
As is typical with any new business that emerges, you had your skeptics, you had your doubters, you know, you had the people who said it wouldn't work, and by it being put together, and again put together in a manner that was sensible and workable, you know, even the skeptics have came around to be the believers and the supporters. It created jobs for our city, and our city, again, is no different than any other city. We needed jobs. What this did was create, I know of at least 4 full-time jobs, you know, 6 part-time jobs, as well as summer youth programs. There's high school students that come from our school down to the mushroom operation, and they're learning the various facets, not only of growing mushrooms, but how to act or interact in a business world. It's helped the entire city young and old, high school students as well as senior citizens, take a much, much greater sense of community pride.
I can hear Arkansas calling me in the air and in my sleep. I can smell an Ozark mountain breeze and get an itchy feeling in my feet. I could tell it just wasn't no kind of place for none of me to occupy space. I can hear Arkansas calling me all the way from there. Get one, cousin.
Community development is an act of midwifery, of a community giving birth to its future. It always begins with people who are willing to talk about the future and what it can become. This is what we see in Shirley, Arkansas, with Tom and Brandy, Greg, Sue, Floyd, and Mark, and the many other folks who are involved in this effort. It shows very clearly that we've all been gifted with the power to make a difference.
When people tell me something's impossible, I don't believe that.
If we can change the lives of 1 or 2 or 3 people, ultimately, that's what we're about.
Try to create in your mind's eye the picture of what you want to be 10 years hence. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't be that.
It was just a good thing for everyone to feel like they were included.
Even the skeptics have came around to be the believers and the supporters.
They have been following a process that is laid down by the principles of community development. Any community can do that.
Now it's a lot of different talk than what it was, see? It's going to grow.